So the first definition that I have for the word discipline is a definition that I got offline, is the self-control that is gained by requiring that rules or orders be obeyed. The self-control that is gained by requiring that rules or orders be obeyed, and the ability to keep working at something that is difficult. So in other words, discipline comes into play here is that when we have rules, when we have laws, when we have orders that are put in place, we measure our effectiveness in being able to obey those orders or those laws or those rules by way of discipline. If we are able to discipline ourselves to conform to what the laws, or to put into practice what the laws are, and to be consistent with it. And the second part of that definition says, and it carries the ability to keep working at something that is difficult. And I'm sure we all can relate to being in situations in areas of leadership where we're faced with difficult tasks, difficult decisions, difficult actions that need to be made. And if we are able to discipline ourselves and maintain a posture of discipline in decision making, we would be most effective. The next definition here of discipline from a psychological, we're going to look at it just from a psychological term, and in that vein, it refers to the ability to control one's thoughts, emotions, and behavior in pursuit of a long-term goal. So we still carry that idea of being able to control. The word control is used both times. In the first definition, it talked about self-control. And from a psychological terminology, it refers to the ability to control, and it gives a little bit more insight of what those things are, which are your thoughts, and being able to control your emotions and be able to control your behaviors. And we find in many areas of leadership today that people don't have control over their emotions. They cannot control their behavior. They seemingly cannot control their actions, and it all starts with thoughts. If you cannot control your thoughts, and it's so funny because many people don't even realize that they have the ability to control their thoughts. Every thought that comes into our minds doesn't necessarily mean that the origination of that thought came from within us. Thoughts can be placed into our minds based upon things of our five senses, things that we see, things that we hear. And it's other things that people say, can have an influence and can impact how we're thinking and the way we're thinking and the things that we think on. So this psychological term for discipline is to have the ability to control. It still comes into play with self-control. Many times we think of discipline, especially if we're looking at it from the standpoint of having to follow a set of rules and orders that are in place. It means that someone else, if we are not following the rules, if we do not walk in obedience to whatever the law is, then there are consequences. And then those consequences derive from us not being able to have discipline to follow. So the consequences are not always good. The consequences for not being disciplined are not pleasant at all, at any level. If we're not in a place of walking in discipline, personal discipline, self-discipline, we're going to have consequences, and those consequences will not be good. It's not good if it's a father-child or mother-child relationship. If you've given a certain rules and you've given certain orders and you've given certain instructions, and if that child does not follow the order or the instructions that you've given for your household, discipline will come into place, and that discipline is forced. It's forced discipline, whereas the child is being made to. is being forced to conform rather than the child himself making a decision. And many times as children get older, they are capable of making a decision to self-discipline themselves, so that the pressure and the outside force is not put upon them to discipline themselves. And even as adults, sometimes life happens, and if life doesn't happen in the way that it does, many times we wouldn't make the right kind of decisions to discipline ourselves as well. It's always best, though, if we have a capacity and a determination that we are going to self-discipline, so that we can avoid someone else having to bring in the pressure and the uncomfortability of making us discipline ourselves. The next area of discipline we're going to look at from a biblical perspective. Now remember, when the Bible, in the Bible, there are two books. There are two testaments. Testament meaning there are two views of what took place. There's the Old Testament, when God dealt with mankind. This was before, after the fall of man, and after the fall of man, and before Christ came into the world to bring redemption for the fall of man. And then once Christ came into the world, it's considered the New Testament. And so in the Old Testament, covenants were made by God with people. And many of these covenants had to do directly with man not being able to discipline themselves, because they had fallen out of grace with God. And the grace and the ability that was given to man, the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, once sin came into play, they lost that. They lost the capacity for being able to function and to live in practicing of discipline. Once that became so natural for them, there was no need, really, because they lived the life of discipline. It was something that was innately on the inside of them. But then once the fall came, there was a need to have a forced discipline, if you would, if I could put it that way, a forced discipline. And that was, even in God's love, to try to redeem and to gain mankind back to the status that they were from the beginning. He put his word, he gave the word of God, and that was considered the covenants that he made with man. And if you would do this, then this will happen. If you will do that, then this will happen. And God put those covenants in place out of a love for men, not to punish, not to just bring unnecessary pressure, not just for control. God made man a free will being to be able to make choices. But the idea is that, and even once the covenants were made with men, they still had to make a choice. They still had the capacity to choose whether they would choose God's way or to choose the own way of their own life, or the pressures of sin. But it was much harder then, because at that point they did not have God's grace upon them. They were disconnected from God because of sin. The Old Testament. So we have an account of all the things that took place with people on the earth after the fall of Adam up to Jesus Christ, to the coming of Christ. In a lot of the promises and covenants that God made with them was the promise of a coming Messiah, the promise of a Savior, the promise of someone that will come and be the answer for the wrong and for the shortcomings that Adam and Eve did not live up to. They didn't live up to the people that God originally intended for them to be. So Christ had to come. Now when Christ entered to earth, then there was the New Testament. And so I'm telling you all of this because I want to make a distinguish between these two definitions that I'm about to give you now with discipline. One is from the Old Testament. We give the account of the Old Testament, and with history we've learned that the Old Testament primarily was the language that the people spoke was Hebrew. So there is the Hebrew language that that gives a definition for discipline. We're gonna look at that, and then we're gonna look at the Greek, which is primarily the New Testament. Most of it written in Greek, and so we're gonna see at the root of these words what the likenesses of them, and if there's any difference in the words. So the first discipline that was given from the Hebrew language is an education or training by implications of correction. To educate or train by implications of correction. Remember, I said to you, God gave the word of His word. The Bible was written, and most of all that was written about the lives of all those people that lived on the earth, the ones whose stories were of such that it was in line with God leading up to the Messiah coming. So He used people's lives. He told their stories. They were, I almost want to use the word characters, but I don't want to minimize by using the word characters for you to think that this was just some story that was told, or like it was in some theater or some play where you have characters on the stage. But these were real life people. And so this word discipline here in the Old Testament was an education or training by implication of correction, chastening, and instruction. So there is an area of discipline that should correct us. Now this is discipline, whether we are disciplining ourselves or whether it's discipline that's having to be imposed upon us. Correction, to chasten us, to chastise us, or to correct us, or to instruct us, or to give instructions for us. The second discipline that we're going to look at from a biblical standpoint, from the I'm sorry, I got that wrong. The first one that I gave you was a Greek definition: education or training by implementation or correction, chastening, and instruction. The next one is from the Hebrew language, which basically sounds the same: chastening or correction. So either way, the word that's being used, discipline, when we see that word in the Bible, when we see the thought of one being disciplined in the Bible, it's whether it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament, it carries the connotation of educating and training and chastening and instruction and correction. So it's all kind of one in the same, this word discipline. But I wanted you to be able to see that very clearly. So here we have these 4 perspectives of discipline. And really, if you have listened carefully, you've heard things like self-control. You've heard words like correction. You've heard words like educating. You've heard words like chastening, instruction, correction. So the whole idea of discipline, and then from the beginning, the secular definition wasn't too far from that. The self-control that is gained by requiring rules or orders. So it all ties in. There are rules, there are ways, there are rules, there are orders that are in place. Regardless of who have the rules, regardless of who gave the orders, but there are codes, there are things that we should live by. There's a way of life that has been set from a biblical perspective, set by God. From a psychological perspective, should be set by oneself, is basically what the psychology says, that we set these codes and we follow these codes for our own lives. Consequently, we should be able to have self-discipline working in us to be able to follow the codes. For instance, if you're an individual and you wanted to get get in shape with your physical body. You put yourself on a particular regimen. You go to the gym and you work out. Going to the gym is never pleasurable. Some people find pleasure in it, but I don't know. Whenever I've gone and whenever I've had to put myself on a disciplined regimen for working out to keep my body in shape, it is difficult, and it is not easy, because it pushes you. It takes you sometimes beyond your own mindset of what you can or cannot do, and it puts pressure, and it adds pressure on you. But for the sake of getting the results that you want in life, then you continue on. You make the decision that the results far outweighs the inconvenience or the pain or the whatever it costs you to get what you want to get in life. And in leadership, we have to have this kind of mentality of discipline. We have to have this mentality of discipline. If we're going to require people, and I'll just use this, when we think about discipline leadership, we think about work. We think about us leading and being responsible for the lives of other people in our businesses, in jobs that we may go to. You have managers, you have supervisors, you have group leads. Whatever the case is, wherever the position of leadership sits, you should find strong discipline. And we're going to look more into that, what that looks like in those roles of leadership. So I want to now refer to the scripture. We always have a scriptural foundation for whatever the tenet of leadership is that we're looking at. And the Bible does have, as I said, it's almost inexhaustible, the different scriptures that's in the Bible pertaining discipline. And as it specifically addressed discipline in areas of leadership. I mean, if we can't make our own selves be true to our own standards, our own orders, our own requirements that we make on ourselves, then how are we going to lead people? Because we must first lead by example. If we're going to lead, whatever it is that we want, whatever result that we want from other people in our leadership, that should be mirrored in our lives. It should be something that someone else sees in demonstration before them. Because we can tell, you can stand and put your policies and procedures together, you can put your handbooks together, of what you believe and what your expectation is, your employee handbooks and so forth. But it's nothing like seeing that in motion before the person as an employee, especially before the leaders. So a leader comes along and says, listen, here is the handbook. This is what the company expects of you. And so here, when you look to me, when you see my life, when you see me in the workflow or in the work mode or in the workplace, you're going to see me demonstrate and be an expression of what even though your roles are different than mine, but your attitude about what you're doing, the commitment level of what you're doing, what it takes to bring success, you should see it all mirrored in the leadership. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. If we're living in a country and there's some laws put in place that people should abide by, laws that will say that will consider the respect that the citizen would respect not only themselves but respect their fellow citizens, then whoever those lawmakers are, that should be expressed. That should be something that is lived out in themselves. Now, how often do we find that? Not very often. Not very often. Not on many levels. Not often at all. But it does not mean that it's impossible. It does not mean that it can't be. It does not mean that it won't be. But I believe that wherever a person is in their leadership roles, if we begin to put into practice, just individually, as I said earlier, you begin to put in practice for yourself. You to make a decision that as a leader, you're going to live a disciplined lifestyle in private and in public. Because ultimately what's happening in private will ultimately spill out into the public, and vice versa. Whatever it is that's happening in the public that you're living by eventually will spill out into the personal. It works hand in hand. So let's look at what the Bible says about, let's get a scriptural foundation for this idea of discipline. We're going to find this one in the book of Hebrews. This is in the New Testament. The book of Hebrews and chapter 12, verse 11. And it says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and and peace for those who have been trained by it." Oh, okay. So we see here there's also an element of training when we're talking about discipline. That when we become a disciple of improvement, when it's improving our own lives, we become a disciple of bringing a positive change. If we become a disciple of those that are leading us, and we discipline, that discipline is the root word of that is disciple. That means that we follow ones that follow the lead. So if you want certain things individually to take place in your life, then you follow your own standards, you follow your own will, you follow and live out those things that you want. If you want temperance, if you want patience, if you want courage, if you want consistency, contentment, those are the things that we have to follow if we want to see those things reproduced in our lives and ultimately reproduced in the lives of other people. So in this book of Hebrews, I'll read it again. It says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, because there's a discipline brings with it a degree of self-denial. It brings with it a degree of delayed modification. Delayed modification too, but delayed gratification, things that would bring pleasure, things that would bring contentment. Those things may have to be delayed for the sake of disciplining yourselves, to put yourselves in a position for those things to take place in your life. That makes sense. But here it says that it's not a pleasant thing. Discipline is always not a pleasant thing, because something has to be put to the side for a moment that could possibly be very pleasurable for you. In other words, if you're going to live a disciplined life of not becoming a gluttony, you're going to have to put aside some of your favorite desserts. You're going to have to put aside some of your favorite foods, those things that could cause you to get the opposite of what you're looking and expecting and hoping for. You lay those aside for the greater cause of being able to get what you desire and what you need in this area of discipline. Let's look at another one in Proverbs chapter 10. Now this one is from the Old Testament. Proverbs is a book that's full, has a lot to say about discipline. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 17 says, "Whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life." If you heed discipline, you show the way to life. But whoever ignores correction leads others astray. Oh my God. So as a leader, as a leader, and we touched on this a little bit last time, somehow we find ourselves in roles of leadership and we feel like we are exempt of growth. We're exempt from being corrected. But according to what the Bible says, when a person carries that kind of attitude, you lead others astray, because now the followers are going to go with just exactly what they see the leader does. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to happen. It may be a gradual thing, but inevitably it's going to happen. It's going to happen in a company. It's going to happen in your home. It's going to happen in your school, wherever you are, wherever your role of leadership takes you. If you're a group leader, it's going to happen in your group. So we want to be very careful about how we walk in this area of discipline. If in the classroom, if the teacher shows up late every week, 9 times out of 10, it's going to water down the rule of getting to class on time. If those in the position of leadership are constantly before those that they're leading, even if they're practicing things that those that they're leading don't see, just the fact that those things are being practiced, somehow it spills over into the whole of whatever it is, the business or whatever it is. From a teacher, if there's no real commitment, if there's no real conviction from those in the leadership, if there's no real demonstration of what it means to live a disciplined life, a doctor that will come in, I kind of look side-eyed at doctors that will come and tell you, this doctor comes in and clearly he's 200 pounds overweight, and he talks to you about the importance of keeping your weight down. Sir, no, I don't think you would quite be the one, because apparently what you're telling, what's being told and what's being shared to the patient is something completely, is not working. It hasn't worked for you. So if it's not working for you and I'm coming to you to tell me what to do, then there may be a little bit of a problem. And again, I'm not trying to put a leader up on this pedestal that nothing should ever go wrong, but it's more of an overall attitude, We're not perfect. You don't want the pressure of having to live some perfect life because you are a leader, but there should be levels of discipline that can easily be identifiable in your position as a leader. There should be some evidence of that. There should be some evidence of what you're saying and entrusting and telling and hoping others to produce for you. You would have to be able to have something that they can see that thing is working and is being applied in your own situation. We're going to move on quickly here. So those were 2 foundational scriptures, one found in Hebrews chapter 12 verse 11, another one found in Proverbs chapter 10 verse 17. Let's jump into our outline. We're going to move through this rather quickly. As I said, I took a little bit of extra time with the definitions today, but I think that will help. So what we're going to look at today is we have 3 areas that we're going to focus on with this idea of discipline. The first one is from a psychological perspective. The second one is from a biblical perspective. We're going to look in a little closer. And then we're going to look at the 3 kinds of self-motivation. And the reason I chose to go with this area of self-motivation is because when you're talking about self-discipline, living a self-disciplined life as a leader, your motivation will 9 times out of 10 will not come from external. It will have to be from internal. It will have to come from yourself. It will have to come from your own resolve. It will have to come from your own goals. It will have to come from your own convictions. It will have to come from your own vision and your ability to be able to, again, practice and live and walk and demonstrate what your expectation is. So those are the three areas that we're going to look at. And our first one is going to be, excuse me just for a moment, thank you. One moment. Okay, sorry about that. Take a little break there. So the first thing that we're going to look at then is from a psychological perspective of discipline. I'm just going to read through my notes here. Psychological perspective is, at the heart of discipline lies a set of cognitive processes that collectively known as executive functions. So now this information that we're sharing regarding the psychological perspective can be found in through an organization called Neurolaunch, 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 and it says that gray matter matters. That's their tagline, Neurolaunch. So we're going to look at three areas here of these executive functions of the brain as it comes to discipline. These are three cognitive processes. The first one is the working memory. The second one is attention regulation. The third one is cognitive flexibility. Now these are areas that, according to the Neurolaunch, these are three executive functions that will help and that should be working in an individual in order for them to maintain a self-disciplined lifestyle. The first one, working memory, is the ability to hold and manipulate information in our minds for maintaining focus or goals. So we set goals. If you're going to have a self-disciplined lifestyle, there has to be some goals. There will have to be things that we go back to those orders, we go back to those rules, we go back to those standards. There has to be things, and specifically in a particular area. If you're leading and your leadership is primarily over a particular area, or you are focused on a specific topic or specific aspect of a project, there are multiple parts of a whole project in your specific area. So you would have to have, for in your specific area, what your standards are, what your expectations are. So the executive function now will give you the ability to hold and to manipulate the information in our minds for retaining focus and staying focused on your goals, is basically what it's saying. To be able to keep that in the forefront of every conversation, of every assignment. We're going to always be thinking about how we have a working memory of what these standards are, of what these rules are, of what our goals are. And those are the things beginning now. We're beginning to create a habit, a constant habit of considering, where we're going, what the rule is, what the goal is, and we begin to practice those things. The second one is attention regulation. Attention regulation refers to, it's also another help to filter out irrelevant stimuli and stay focused on what matters, equivalent of putting on noise cancellation headphones. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe it was in a noisy airport or something, and you just kind of wanted to zone out and tune everything out around you, so you get these headphones that are noise canceling so that you will only hear and only be able to focus on the thing that is interesting to you, whether it's podcast, whether it's just listening to some nice smooth music, whatever it is, but it keeps you focused on the thing that you are interested in. So attention regulation, your attention is being regulated. So you have measures that you put in place to filter out those things that are irrelevant, that'll keep you from just being all over the place. The third one is cognitive flexibility. And again, this is the ability to adapt our thinking and behavior in response to changing circumstances. The ability to adapt our thinking and our behavior in response to changing circumstances, allowing us to pivot when our initial strategies aren't working and finding new paths. In other words, we'll make it simple again. I think it's always, to use practical things. For instance, let's just say that you're working out in a gym and you find out that these curls that you've been doing are not working for you at all. And so even though your trainer may be telling you, okay, we're going to do so many curls and we're going to do this routine so many times, but the routine they have you on, you're not seeing the results. So this idea of cognitive flexibility means that you are able to change your mind and switch. And one day the trainer may come in and say, we're not doing it this way. I know I've taught you to do it this way, but I want to try something different with you right now. So you're going to have to be flexible enough to change your mind and pivot and turn to something that may prove to be more effective than continuing on the same road that you've been on and not getting the results that you want to get. All of this is a part of discipline, because you know what happens if you continue in doing the very thing that's not giving you the results that you want? You become discouraged. You'll eventually just what's the point? We're not getting the results. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose time. You may possibly even lose the human resources, because if a person who's very skilled in something and they feel that they're working towards something or working for someone or on something that's not bringing any kind of fulfillment or is not in any way using or stimulating their gifts and their abilities and the things that they bring to the table, they're gonna, they'll back down. But why? Some reasons why people just are hard. They don't want to change. It's fear of the unknown. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. Don't be afraid to try something different. All of this could be a part of discipline. If whatever the areas that you're doing or that you're practicing not bringing the results that you need, then be open for change. That's one of the biggest things, is fear of the unknown. But sometimes we'll have to take the risk. We'll have to walk in an area that we may not be comfortable with, we may not be familiar with, but we just don't want to get stuck in our leadership. Okay? Let's look at number 2. The first one was the psychological perspective, and those were the three the cognitive processes: working memory, attention regulation, and cognitive flexibility. You should be able to give those back to me when I ask for them, and I will ask for them. The next one is a biblical. Let's look at it from a biblical standpoint. At the heart of discipline, according to the Bible, is God's love and care that will correct and guide those who follow Him into the better way of life. So God, as we said from the beginning, God has a way of how He intended for us to address issues. He has a way that, and His way of it is not to beat a person down or to demean a person's character or their intentions, or to make you feel small, or to control. He's not some kind of cosmic psychopath that's, with this big ego, but His whole intent is for love. His whole intent is to love, and out of that love is to give. And the Bible makes the example of it, that you use a man that will discipline his child. You don't discipline your children because you're just so angry with them. Some people do, But for the most part, you see that they're going the wrong way, and you want them to be bent toward a better way. You want better for them. You see that the direction that's being followed by them in certain things is the wrong direction. So you want to discipline them. You want to chastise them. You want to correct them. You want to help them and pull them back to the way that will cause them to get a good result, to a way that will cause them not to bring harm to themselves, not to hurt themselves. Well, God is no different than that for us. And when God has to chasten us, and when he has to correct us, it's not, some people have this ideology that God does bad thing to people to correct them and to chasten them. That's nowhere to be found in the Bible. If someone has ever told you that, it's not true. You will never find in the Bible where God will use evil to correct or to discipline people that does not follow his way. But God is a loving God, and he the whole idea of discipline, putting discipline in place from the very beginning, was out of love for his people, because the people came short. They had messed up. They misstepped. They got out of the will of God. They got away from the things of God. And his intention for bringing the word, which he uses to correct, is to bring them back, not to kill them, not to destroy them, not to cause them not to ever succeed in life. That's not what God wants. So hence we have, let's look at some, at the heart of discipline is God's love and care that will correct and guide those who follow him into the better way of life. And I want you to understand this too, and I've said it before. So we've heard about we've just talked about those three areas from a psychological standpoint of what we can do. And here, and those were good points that we just made. So if we married that with not that God's word needs to have anything else to make it valuable or correct or more important, because it stands in and of itself as the way of life. But I think what the psychological areas that we just mentioned to you, the information that we gave you, the executive functions, is just to show us how our brain functions. It's not necessarily to discredit that ultimately following God has the answers. And it shows us how we take that when we follow him and follow God, how those functions work in our brain. I want you to make sure we're clear on that. But anyway, I want to, at this juncture, give you a few biblical scriptures on the idea of discipline, which I think will also just confirm and validate that God had in mind about, it was his idea of discipline. Discipline in our leadership, discipline in our personal lives, whatever area of discipline that we may need. It was his mind, and his purpose was to correct us and to help us to get things right. The first one is found in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 32. And this one says, "Those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding." You disregard discipline, meaning that you're despising your own self. But the one who heeds correction gains understanding. And how many of us know and can say that we sure need to have understanding in the area of leadership, understanding of people, understanding of processes, understanding of what it takes for us to motivate people, to do work or whatever it is that we need to accomplish or need to have accomplished by them. Another one is found in the New Testament, Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. And it reads, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Here we go with the self-control leans toward the discipline. And so the Bible refers this as a fruit. This is a fruit of those who follow after God, those that are born of the Spirit of God. They are automatically have this fruit in their nature that they it's this gift of self-control. Now, how that self-control is developed depends on the individual, but we do have the capacity. And remember, we were saying earlier, unlike when God first dealt with mankind after the fall, they did not have a capacity for self-control. People just did whatever, kind of like what we see happening in the world today. There's so many people that are lacking in the area of self-control and discipline. And the Bible, along with that, in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, verse 23 said, "And against such things there is no law." There's no law. There's no rule against self-control. Because when a person is in self-control, who can put anything to that? Who has anything negative to say about someone that has control over themselves? It's the love of God. It's simple. It's pleasing for people that are around the individuals. It's pleasing for the individual. The next one is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 and 12. "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke. Because the Lord's discipline those he loves, as a father the son he delights in." In other words, we just said it. Just like a father would discipline his children, or a mother would discipline their children, God has to discipline us, not because he hates us, not because he wants to control us, not because he doesn't, like many times we discipline our children and their first thought is, oh, they just don't want me to have fun and they just want to control me. No, discipline comes out of love and out of protection many times. And just like we as parents have lived much longer than our children have, we know how some things go. Yes, it's a different generation, but there's some things in life that are just repetitive and it perpetuates. And we know we want to try to avoid them from going through pain and suffering as much as we can. And sometimes the choices and the ways that they're going may lead toward that. So we have to discipline them. We set the rules, and if they don't follow the rules, discipline has to come. The last one is Proverbs chapter 10, verse 4. "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." We cannot be lazy. If you're lacking in discipline, that means that you're full in slothfulness and just being lazy. We don't want to do it. We don't feel like doing it. We don't want to put the effort in. We don't want to put the time in. We don't want the pressure and the resistance. But the pressure and the resistance are the very thing that's going to help. That's what's going to build the muscle up. And the pressure that we put on ourselves and the discipline that we put on ourselves to do was to make wise choices and wise decisions. Those are the things that are building our character. They build our leadership skills. They build our values. They build our morals. And when we're lacking in that, consequently, we have things like some of the things that we're seeing in our societies today that are not pleasant at all. And our last area here, our time is moving very quickly. I wanted to go over the 3 kinds of self-motivation. So in all of what we said in this session, it's important that leaders are self-motivated. And I don't mean outside of the Word of God, because the Bible is full of things to help us to stay motivated. But if we don't have regard for those things and we try to do it in and of ourselves, we're going to come short. We're going to get the short end of the stick every time. But in considering these 3 things, we call self-motivation, simply meaning that it has to come from you. It has to come from your own heart, your own conviction, your own desire, your own goals, your own vision. The first one is intrinsic, which derives from satisfaction of personal growth. person will have to be they will be more disciplined in their lives once they see that the things that they're practicing, the things that they're putting, the choices that they're making, that it is bringing satisfaction of personal growth and their personal development, particularly in leadership. It's just so you intrinsically want to be disciplined. You want to do the things that will help you move forward, or to help your people to move forward. The second one is goal setting. Without goals, you have nothing to reach for. You have really, people wake up and say, I just feel I don't have nothing to live for. If you hear a person that speaks in that way, that means that they have no goals. They have no aspirations. They have nothing to reach for. They have nothing to work toward. Goals are very important. It takes us back to our first class about vision, having a vision for your life, having a vision for those that you lead. The final one is self-determination. You have to have some determination. One day on, one day off is not going to get it. You have to be consistent in your determination that you're going to excel, you're going to exceed, that you are going to gain and meet your goals. And you have to work hard at that, even when it's painful to the flesh, if it's a physical workout, whatever it takes, painful to the mind if you've just given yourself to find and to do research, and you've just digging and you feel like you've put in as much as you can, but it will stretch. If we're not stretching, we're not growing. If we want so much, mankind wants to stay in this state of homeostasis where we're just comfortable. We don't want resistance. We don't want change. We don't want to be stretched. We don't want to be uncomfortable. But it is in those places that we develop and become strong. We become strong leaders, and we teach others how to become strong leaders as well. So our time is up for today. Thank you. And I hope that you've got some information that can help you on your journey as a good, strong leader, and no matter what area of leadership you find yourself. So we'll see you next time. And remember to get those homework assignments back to me by the Friday before the next class. Thanks. Be blessed.